The ammonia scent of the window cleaner was the ghost of her real life. Here, in the silent, sprawling office on the 72nd floor, Clara was the one who was invisible. She moved through the space like a whisper, her worn trainers silent on the obsidian-black marble. Her reflection was a pale, watery thing in the floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over a city of scattered diamonds. The desk, a vast continent of polished mahogany, held nothing personal. No photographs, no stray papers, just a single, severe black laptop. Closed. Mr. Al-Jamil did not live here. He merely commanded from here. Her job was to erase any sign that a human had been present at all, to wipe away the faint ring from a water glass, to polish the single fingerprint left on a chrome handle, to empty the wastebasket containing nothing more than a few shredded documents. She worked from 10 p.m. until 2 a.m., part of a crew that serviced the entire Al-Jamil Industries tower. But this office was hers alone. A special assignment. They said he was particular. Clara thought he was just empty. The air was cold, recycled, and carried the faint, metallic scent of immense wealth. She ran her cloth over the smooth, cool surface of the desk, her movements practiced and efficient. Her mind was miles away, in a small, stuffy apartment that smelled of rubbing alcohol and her mother's lavender sachets. It was a place of mounting bills and whispered reassurances, of the soft, rattling cough that was the soundtrack to Clara's every waking thought. This job, this silent, sterile work, was for that. For the oxygen tanks and the prescriptions whose names she could now spell from memory. This was only the first half of her night. The second half was for hope. Have you ever felt like a ghost in someone else's story? Clara does, every single day. A shadow polishing the edges of a life she can't even imagine. But that's all about to change, because sometimes being seen is more dangerous than being invisible. Stick with me, and tell me in the comments if you've ever had a moment that changed your entire life in a single glance. Her shift ended. She shed her light blue uniform top in the staff locker room, pulling on a faded gray hoodie, but she kept the trousers. They were durable. She clocked out, collected the heavy, insulated bag from her locker, and descended 72 floors, not in the silent, express elevator he would use, but in the rattling, groaning service lift that smelled of grease and disinfectant. The transition from the tower's marble lobby to the gritty, steam-hissing street was always a shock. Out here, the air was thick and alive, smelling of roasted nuts and exhaust fumes. She walked 12 blocks to her corner, found her usual spot under the flickering orange glow of a street lamp, and began to unpack. One by one, she set out the small, clear plastic containers. Inside each were 6 perfect squares of sea salt caramel brittle. Her mother's recipe, a recipe that tasted of home, of a life before this one. She set up her small, hand-painted sign, Sweet Hope, $5, then she stood, and she waited, the city's indifferent river of traffic rushing past her. The city was a smear of light through the tinted windows of the BMW. Tariq Al-Jamil did not look at it. He saw the same view from his office, from his penthouse. A kingdom of lights he commanded but did not touch. He was suspended above it, encased in layers of steel, glass, and silence. His driver, Ferris, navigated the dense evening traffic with an unnerving calm, the car a silent black predator sliding through the chaos. Tariq's head was leaned back against the cool leather, his eyes closed. He was processing the day's data. Currency fluctuations, acquisition reports, the quiet, bureaucratic warfare of his world. Numbers were clean. They were logical. They did not cough in the night or look at you with pleading, terrified eyes. They did not die and leave you with the weight of an empire you never asked for. He was thinking of his brother. He was always, in these quiet moments, thinking of his brother. He opened his eyes, the numbers fading, replaced by the familiar ache. That was when he saw her, just a flicker of movement and pale color at the edge of his vision. Ferris was slowing for a red light, and the car glided to a stop directly adjacent to a small patch of sidewalk. And there she was, under a sputtering street lamp, wearing the light blue trousers of his building's cleaning staff, was one of the ghosts. He'd never seen her face before. Not really. He'd passed them in the halls, these silent women who kept his world pristine. their faces always averted, their presence fleeting. But now he saw her. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her shoulders slumped, but she stood straight, her chin up against the cold wind that whipped strands of blonde hair across her cheeks. She was selling something. Small plastic boxes. Candy. He could read the small, neat sign. A jolt, sharp and unpleasant, went through him. One of his cleaners. Selling candy on a street corner after her shift. The sheer, unadorned desperation of it was a violation of the sterile order of his life. It was a loose thread in the perfect tapestry he had fought so hard to maintain. The light changed. The car began to move. He didn't say a word, didn't look back. But the image was seared onto the back of his eyelids. The tired girl in the blue uniform. The hopeful, hand-painted sign. The vast, indifferent city. It was a detail that was wrong. And Tariq al-Jamil did not tolerate things that were wrong. The wind was a thief, stealing the little warmth Clara had left. She sold 3 boxes in the first hour. A tired-looking woman in scrubs who smiled and said they were for her kids. A young couple who were laughing, their faces flushed with a happiness that felt like a foreign language to Clara. For a moment, watching them walk away, their arms linked, she felt a pang of something sharp and lonely. She pushed it down. Loneliness was a luxury she couldn't afford to feel. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a lifeline. She saw the name and a real smile, small but genuine, touched her lips. "Hey, Jess, Clara? Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Are you out there again?" Jess's voice was a warm, panicked rush from a world away, from the small town they'd both grown up in. "I'm fine. It's not so bad tonight. A little windy." "A little windy? Clara, it's November in the city. It's freezing. This is insane. You can't keep doing this." Clara shifted her weight, turning her back to the wind. "The new medication isn't fully covered. You know that. This helps." It really does. She didn't tell Jess that she'd eaten nothing but a piece of toast that day, that her feet were numb inside her thin shoes, that the hope she was selling felt more fraudulent with every car that sped past without a glance. "Is there any change?" Jess asked, her voice softer now. "With your mom. She had a good morning," Clara lied, the words tasting like ash. "She watched her shows. We talked." The truth was her mother had barely woken up, her breathing a shallow, ragged thing that terrified Clara more than any bill. The silence on the line was heavy. Jess knew. Of course she knew. "I just worry about you," Jess finally whispered. "I know," Clara said, her own voice tight. "Don't. I'm okay. I have to go." Someone stopping, another lie. No one was stopping. She just couldn't bear the pity in her friend's voice for another second. She ended the call, and the silence that rushed back in was colder than the wind. She looked at her remaining boxes of brittle, each one a tiny, fragile weight. She stayed for 2 more hours and sold nothing else. The penthouse was a cage of glass and quiet. Tariq stood before the window, the same view as his office, only higher, more remote. The city lights below were a cold fire. He had everything he was supposed to want. Power, wealth, a name that made men twice his age deferential. And he was utterly, profoundly alone in it. The silence was broken by the softest of sounds. Ferris had entered the room. He stood by the door, a tall, unmoving silhouette. He never spoke unless spoken to. "The girl," Tariq said, his voice quiet, devoid of inflection. He didn't turn from the window. "The cleaner. The one selling things on the corner of 5th and Elm." Ferris's expression did not change. He simply inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement. He had been with Tariq since the beginning, since Tariq was a boy of 21 who had inherited an empire and a catastrophic grief in the same week. Ferris understood the language of his silences. "I want to know everything," Tariq continued. "Her name, why she is in my building, why she is on that street. I want to know about her family, her debts, her fears, everything." By morning, it was not a request. It was a statement of fact, an activation of the vast, unseen machinery that moved silently beneath the surface of his life. Ferris gave another single, sharp nod. "It will be done." He turned and left as quietly as he had arrived. The door clicked shut, and the silence returned, heavier this time. Tarek's gaze fell on a small, framed photograph on a side table. It was the only personal item in the cavernous room. A young man, laughing, his arm thrown around a younger Tarek's shoulders. His brother, Kareem. The one who was meant for all this. The one who had been full of life and light and easy smiles. Tarek picked it up, his thumb tracing the line of his brother's jaw. Kareem would have stopped the car. He would have gotten out, bought all the candy with a charming laugh, and given the girl a handful of cash. He would have made it easy. Tarek did not know how to make things easy. He only knew how to identify a problem and eliminate it. And this girl, this ghost with the exhausted face, had just become a problem. The summons came at noon the next day. A crisp, formal email from Mr. Al-Jamil's executive assistant requesting Clara's presence in his office at 4 p.m. sharp. Not the cleaning supervisor. Mr. Al-Jamil himself. Clara's blood went cold. She read it 3 times, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. Someone had seen her. Someone had reported her. Selling things on the street while technically an employee, it had to be a breach of some clause in the fine print of the contract she'd barely read. She was going to be fired. The thought sent a wave of nausea through her. This job, as soulless as it was the only thing keeping her and her mother from drowning. The walk from the service elevator to the executive floor felt like a mile. Her standard-issue work trousers and polo shirt felt coarse and cheap in the hushed, carpeted corridor. The assistant, a woman with hair like a black helmet, looked up, her expression a mask of polite indifference. "He's waiting for you." The door to his office was a slab of dark wood that seemed to absorb all sound. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, making the dust motes dance like tiny fairies in the air. He was not at his desk. He was standing by the window, his back to her, a tall, still figure in a perfectly tailored suit. He didn't turn. The silence stretched, thin and tight, pulling at her nerves. She stood just inside the door, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. "Mr. Al-Jamil?" she finally managed, her voice a reedy whisper. He turned slowly. In the daylight, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. His eyes were dark, intense, and they held hers without effort. She felt pinned by his gaze, seen in a way that was more unnerving than being invisible. He said nothing for another long moment. Then, "The candy you sell, it wasn't a question." His voice was a low, quiet rumble, accented in a way that was both beautiful and intimidating. "What is it?" The question was so bizarre, so completely outside the realm of what she had braced herself for, that she could only stare. I'm sorry." "The candy," he repeated, his gaze unwavering. "Sea salt caramel brittle," she stammered, the words feeling clumsy and ridiculous in this room. "It's an old family recipe." He took a step towards her, then another. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that she could see the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes, the stark, uncompromising set of his mouth. "Your mother is ill," he stated, and this time the words hit her like a physical blow. "The medical debt is $243,000 and climbing. You have been denied for 3 separate assistance programs. You work 17 hours a day. You sleep on average." For inch he recited the facts of her life as if reading a stock report, each detail a new layer of violation. She felt stripped bare, her private, desperate struggle laid out on his mahogany desk like a specimen for study. A cold dread settled in Clara's stomach, heavy and suffocating. This was worse than being fired. This was a dissection. He knew everything. The sheer, invasive power of it left her breathless. She felt a surge of useless, defiant anger. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice shaking but firm. He regarded her for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes.
Surprise?
Respect? She couldn't tell. He walked back to the window, putting the desk between them again, a king returning to his throne. "I have a problem, Miss Evans," he said, his tone shifting, becoming purely transactional. I require a wife. A temporary arrangement. It needs to be someone unconnected to my world. Someone simple. Someone who will not ask questions and will perform the necessary social duties with quiet dignity. Clara stared at him, convinced she was having some kind of waking nightmare. This couldn't be real. The air in the room felt thin, hard to breathe. You need a wife, she repeated numbly. And you're telling me this. Why? Because you also have a problem, he said, turning to face her fully. His expression was impassive, but his eyes held a terrifying intensity. A problem I can solve. Marry me. A 1-year contract. Your mother will be moved to the finest private care facility in the country. Her debts will be erased. You will be given a stipend that will ensure you never have to stand on a street corner again. In return, you will be Mrs. Al-Jamil. You will attend events with me. You will live in my home. You will present the image of a stable, settled man. The words hung in the air, clinical and monstrous. It wasn't a proposal. It was an acquisition. He was offering to buy her life, to solve her desperation with the same detached efficiency he would use to acquire a rival corporation. Her mind reeled. The absurdity, the sheer audacity of it. Okay, let's just pause right here. Contract. Not a confession of love, but a solution to a problem. This is the moment where everything splits into a before and an after. What would you do? Walk away from the terrifying, insulting offer, or walk towards the only chance you have to save the person you love most? I need to know what you're thinking. Drop your choice in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe, because the choice she makes will change everything. Clara wanted to laugh. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something at his handsome, unfeeling face. You're insane, she whispered. Perhaps, he conceded, without a trace of emotion. But I am also your only viable solution. Just as she was about to tell him exactly where he could put his viable solution, the heavy office door creaked open. A small girl, no older than 6, slipped into the room. She was a miniature portrait of solemnity, with huge, dark eyes like her uncle's and 2 neat black braids. She clutched a bright yellow crayon in one fist and a piece of paper in the other. Her gaze swept the room and, ignoring Tarek completely, landed on Clara. The child's presence shattered the high-stakes tension in the room, replacing it with something softer, more confusing. Tarek's posture changed almost imperceptibly. A fractional drop of his shoulders, a slight softening of his jaw. He didn't speak. The little girl walked directly up to Clara, her small shoes silent on the marble. She stopped right in front of her and held up the piece of paper. It was a drawing. A wobbly, bright yellow sun with a smiling face, radiating crooked lines of light. For you, the girl said, her voice as serious as her expression. Clara was floored. She looked from the drawing to the child's earnest face. She had seen this little girl once or twice in the corridors late at night, a silent little shadow being led by the hand by a nanny. She had always looked so lonely. Instinct took over. Clara knelt down, bringing herself to the girl's level. For me? It's beautiful. Thank you. The girl's solemn expression didn't change, but she held out her other hand, the one with the yellow crayon. Your turn, Tarek finally spoke, his voice different now, quieter without the hard corporate edge. Layla, it was a gentle admonishment, but the girl paid him no mind. She kept her eyes on Clara. Clara looked from the crayon, to Layla's waiting face, to Tarek, who was watching the scene with an expression of profound, guarded stillness. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't her boss. He was just a man watching a child he clearly loved interact with a stranger. Clara saw the grief in him then, not as an absence, but as a living thing he carried. She saw the loneliness that filled this vast, empty office. Without thinking, she took the crayon. Its waxy warmth was a small, real thing in her hand. Layla finally offered a tiny, fleeting smile, transformed her face. And in that smile, in that simple, trusting gesture, Clara felt the world tilt on its axis. He gave her 24 hours. He had Layla discreetly escorted from the room by the helmet-haired assistant, and the cold, transactional atmosphere snapped back into place, But it was too late. The crack had appeared. Clara had seen the man behind the monolith. She spent the night not sleeping, but pacing the small confines of her apartment, the scent of lavender and antiseptic clinging to everything. The offer was a cage. A beautiful, gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. She would be a possession, a placeholder, a solution to a problem she didn't understand. She would be trading her freedom, her very self, for her mother's life. And yet, the image of her mother's frail, sleeping form in the other room, the sound of her labored breathing, was a constant, painful pressure in her chest. Then there was the other image, the one she couldn't shake. Layla's small, serious face, her absolute trust. The way Tariq had looked at his niece, with a love so fierce and protective it was like a shield around him. He was not a monster. He was something more complicated. Something wounded. She called Jess, her voice a low murmur in the pre-dawn quiet. He offered me a way out, Jess. A way to fix everything for Mom. She explained the situation in halting, whispered sentences. The silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. Clara, no. Jess finally breathed, her voice filled with horror. You can't. It's something out of a twisted fairy tale. He wants to buy you. He wants to save my mother. Clara corrected, her voice flat. It's not the same thing. Of course it's the same thing. What about you? What about your life? What life? Clara asked, and the bitterness in her own voice surprised her. My life is cleaning toilets and selling candy on the street and praying the next hospital bill doesn't bankrupt us. My life is watching my mother fade away. This is not a life, Jess. It's a slow death, they argued. But Clara's mind was already made up. It had been made up the moment she took that yellow crayon from Layla's hand. It was a choice between two impossibilities, and she was choosing the one that led to her mother's survival. At 4 p.m. the next day, she walked back into that office. He was at his desk this time, the picture of control. He looked up as she entered, his face unreadable. She didn't wait for him to speak. Yes, she said. The word was small, but it filled the vast, silent room. My answer is yes. For the first time, she saw him react. A muscle in his jaw tightened. He gave a single, sharp nod. Ferris will handle the arrangements, and that was it. The deal was done. Her life had been sold. The transition was as swift and impersonal as a corporate merger. One day she was in her cramped apartment. The next she was an occupant of Tariq al-Jamil's penthouse. Her few belongings, a box of books, her mother's recipe journal, a framed photo of her parents, looked small and pathetic in the cavernous walk-in closet filled with clothes in her size she had never seen before. Designers she'd only read about in magazines. They felt like a costume. Her mother had been moved that morning by private ambulance to a clinic that looked more like a luxury resort. Clara had spoken to the doctor on the phone, a kind-voiced man who spoke of treatment plans and recovery with a calm confidence that made her want to weep with relief. The price of that relief was this. Standing awkwardly in a kitchen that was larger than her entire apartment, a sterile expanse of white marble and stainless steel. Ferris had shown her around with minimal words, his presence a constant, stoic reminder of her new reality. The first dinner was an exercise in excruciating silence. Tariq, Clara, and Layla sat at a dining table that could have seated 20. Layla was the only one who seemed comfortable, meticulously arranging her green beans into a perfect square. Tariq ate with a precise, focused economy of motion. He asked Layla about her day. He did not ask Clara anything. She felt like a ghost again, but a different kind. A well-dressed ghost at a banquet. She's in his world now, but she's not of it. That silence between them is so loud. Isn't it? It's in these quiet moments that the real story is written. Who do you think is more trapped in that beautiful penthouse, Clara or Tariq? Let me know your thoughts. After Layla was taken to bed by her nanny, Clara escaped to the kitchen. She needed to do something with her hands. Something real. She opened cabinets, familiarizing herself with the alien landscape. Everything was top of the line, and used. She found a coffee machine and began the simple, grounding ritual of making a cup. She was measuring the grounds when she felt a presence. He was standing in the doorway. A doorway moment. He wasn't entering her space, just observing it. He had taken off his suit jacket, and his sleeves were rolled up to his forearms. It was the least formal she had ever seen him. The silence stretched, but it felt different here, in the relative intimacy of the kitchen at night. "You don't have to do that," he said, his voice low. "There is staff, I know," she said, not looking at him. "I like making my own coffee," she finished, her movements deliberate, and leaned against the counter, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. He was still in the doorway, a sentinel guarding the border between his world and this small territory she was trying to claim. "Clara," he said. It was the first time he had used her given name. He said it not as a summons, but as a question, as if he were testing the shape of it in his mouth, learning it for the first time. She finally met his gaze. "Tarek," she replied, matching his tone. A strange equilibrium settled between them. Contract signed. Names exchanged. A beginning. 3 days passed in a haze of quiet observation and unspoken rules. Clara learned the rhythms of the house, the silent efficiency of the staff, Layla's quiet playtime, Tarek's departures before dawn and his late returns. She spoke to her mother's doctor every day and felt the knot of anxiety in her chest slowly begin to loosen. Her mother was stable. She was resting. She was being cared for. On the 4th day, Clara couldn't stand the sterile perfection any longer. She needed to create something. She went into the kitchen, and with a sense of quiet defiance, she took out her mother's recipe journal. The book was worn, its pages softened with age and stained with vanilla and butter. She found the ingredients in the massive pantry, the finest Belgian chocolate, Tahitian vanilla, raw sugar crystals like tiny gems. It felt strange to use such luxurious materials for such a simple, homey recipe. She worked for hours, the familiar process of meditation. She melted the butter and sugar, the scent of caramel beginning to bloom, a warm, sweet perfume that pushed back against the kitchen's cold sterility. She toasted almonds, stirred in the salt, and poured the molten mixture onto a marble slab to cool. For the first time in days, she felt like herself. She was breaking the brittle into jagged, beautiful pieces when they appeared in the doorway. Tarek and Layla both silent. Layla's eyes were wide, drawn by the scent. Tarek's face was, as always, an unreadable mask, but his gaze was fixed on the scattered pieces of candy on the counter. Layla broke the silence. She patted over, pointing a small finger. "What is that?" "It's brittle," Clara said, her voice soft. "My mom and I used to make it." She picked up a small piece and offered it to the girl. Layla looked to Tarek for permission. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Layla took the candy and popped it in her mouth. Her eyes widened even further, a look of pure, unadulterated delight. A real, genuine smile spread across her face. Tarek watched his niece, and the mask on his own face cracked. A warmth, faint but undeniable, touched the corners of his eyes. It was the most emotion she had ever seen from him. Driven by an impulse she didn't understand, Clara picked up another piece, larger this time, and held it out to him. "Would you like to try?" He stared at her outstretched hand, at the imperfect, golden-brown piece of candy nestled in her palm. He hesitated for a long, charged moment. The space between them crackled with unspoken things. Then slowly he reached out. His fingers, long and cool, brushed against hers as he took the brittle. The touch was electric, a tiny shock that shot up her arm. And almost, he brought the candy to his lips and bit into it. The sharp crack echoed in the silent kitchen. He chewed slowly, his dark eyes never leaving hers. He swallowed. He did not say it was good. He did not say thank you. He said nothing at all. But he didn't have to. Something in the room had fundamentally, irrevocably shifted. The air was now warm and complicated and full of things that didn't have names yet. She offered him a piece of her world, and he took it. The deal is signed, but the contract of the heart is just being drafted. What happens when the lines of their arrangement begin to blur, and the quiet danger of his world comes knocking on her door? If you need to know what comes next, Make sure you've subscribed and turned on notifications. The story of Clara and Tarek is only just beginning.